The Pacific Northwest has always had a rich history of shipbuilding, and the companies and facilities that are Vigor Industrial have proudly contributed to that history for over 100 years. From Ketchikan to Seattle, from Everett to Portland, from Port Angeles to Tacoma and Seward, we at Vigor have always been innovators in shipbuilding and repair. During the boom years of World War II, we earned 33 U.S. military awards for our many contributions to the war effort, including assembling tankers at an astonishing rate of 1 every 4.5 days. As the war ended and times changed, our companies adapted. We built passenger liners, modernized a fleet of Coast Guard cutters, and built the largest car ferries in the country. Since the 1990s, that innovation has continued with our contributions to the development of oil resources in Alaska, the growth and success of the West Coast cruise industry, modernization of the nation's defense and research vessels, and the maintenance and viability of the U.S. Merchant Marine Fleet. The companies and facilities that have become Vigor Industrial have created billions of dollars in economic activity and tens of thousands of jobs over the decades. Key to this history is our ability to partner with skilled people like you and to create high-caliber teams to get the work done safely. These teams are formed on a project-by-project basis and are integral to our success. It is a rich history, a proud history, and we welcome you to becoming part of our team. Together, we will finish our work safely, on time, and in an environmentally responsible manner. Our commitment to safety is a sacred trust shared with every person who works in each of our Vigor facilities. Significant time and energy is devoted to safeguarding that trust. While this video covers most of the basics, it should not be considered a substitute for any internal policies that your company may have, or be considered all-inclusive, since each Vigor location may have small differences in policies and procedures. Please pay attention to this video to help ensure that everyone who comes to work here goes home in the same condition in which they arrived. So, welcome to Vigor. Safety at Vigor begins with the laws and regulations of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, the basic standard for our work. Some of our work may be covered by a different standard or a state agency, but always in compliance. It is our expectation that each company we work for and with is also compliant with all regulatory requirements. A critical aspect of our collective safety is our stop work policy. If a situation appears unsafe, every employee or contractor has the authority and is expected to use that authority to stop work. Even if the work doesn't directly affect you, it may affect someone else. So please, report these issues to your supervisor or a safety representative immediately to help keep us all safe. Safe work begins with effective communication. At Vigor, we perform a pre-shift job hazard analysis to make sure we are all aligned.
Okay guys, this morning,
Communication is the cornerstone of every project we do at Vigor, and every project manager or ship superintendent will explain the preferred chain of communication with you. We encourage you to participate in this process. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is required in all Vigor locations. It's important to remember that PPE is generally the last line of defense after engineering controls, safe work practices, and administrative controls are put in place. Always try to remove or limit the hazard before using PPE. It is essential that you familiarize yourself with the PPE requirements of the facility you are working in. The following are in effect in all Vigor locations. Personal flotation devices, or PFDs, are mandatory anytime you are over water or working on the unguarded edge of a floating vessel. They'll also keep you afloat if you are knocked unconscious. To ensure proper function, They must be fastened securely by using zippers, straps, or any other combination specific to that model. If any part of the PFD is defective, or if the unit is damaged, it must be replaced. The work at Vigor is often done high above ground level, and one of the best methods of fall protection is the use of a full body harness, which is mandatory in the following conditions. Anytime you're working at heights greater than 5 feet that are not protected by other means such as handrails. Any operations conducted in an aerial lift platform. Any other time it is required. It is expected that anyone required to use fall protection has been fully trained and authorized by their employer.
When I was a kid, my grandfather and my father worked out here. I've been here 25 years. I've seen contractors come and go. The best contractors are the ones that are the safest and the most knowledgeable. The way the work progresses here, it goes fast. It's always moving. So if you do that in a safe manner, communicate in a safe manner, then it's going to work out very well.
In work environments as dynamic as ours, staying on top of housekeeping is a critical element for both safety and productivity. Unnecessary mess gets in the way of production operations and also creates hazards that may lead to injury. From items falling to tripping hazards, every mess you leave behind creates a risk. Each person is responsible for keeping their work area clean and free of hazards. This is true whether you work on a ship or in a shop. When working on a ship, only bring the materials you need to do your work. This will help minimize the accumulation of unnecessary items in work areas. It is essential that when you run your leads, ventilation, and extension cords, or any other lines, you keep walkways and aisleways clear and keep them off the deck. This will eliminate tripping and allow for safe evacuation in the event of an emergency. If you're required to run lines on a deck, make certain crossovers are put in place to protect both the lines and prevent trip hazards. Working in confined spaces is likely to be a significant part of your work here. There are two critical definitions of spaces for you to be aware of: confined and enclosed. The term confined space means a compartment with limited access, no permanent lighting or ventilation, and not meant to be inhabited. Examples of a confined space are a double-bottom tank, cofferdam, or other space by which its nature can readily create or aggravate a hazardous exposure. The term enclosed space means any space other than a confined space which is enclosed by bulkheads and overhead. It includes cargo holds, tanks, quarters, and machinery and boiler spaces. Confined and enclosed spaces are potentially dangerous because the materials kept in these spaces are often hazardous when combined with the work we perform. Often there is little natural airflow in these spaces because they are designed to be water and air tight. As a result, gases and vapors tend to accumulate unless steps are taken to create proper ventilation. Employees should assume that all confined and enclosed spaces are hazardous until cleared and documented by a shipyard competent person. Spaces that have been tested are categorized in 3 ways. The first is not safe for entry. This is a space that either has not been tested or has been tested and been determined unsafe because elements in the air prohibit safe breathing. Again, you should assume all spaces are in this condition until you have personally reviewed the current documentation for the space. It is essential that in the event of an emergency, you not proceed into a tank that is unsafe for entry or where the atmospheric conditions are unknown. While your instinct may be to help, every year, individuals who attempt a rescue in a confined space become victims themselves. Your role is to make certain you follow the emergency notification procedure in your facility so that the right individuals are notified immediately and can implement a safe rescue. 2. Safe for entry. This is a space that has been inspected, and the air is to breathe without an alternate breathing apparatus. This space, however, is not safe for any form of hot work. 3. Safe for entry, safe for hot work. This is a space that has been inspected and has been determined safe to enter and to conduct spark-producing work activities. All adjacent spaces must be inspected for air quality and to ensure there are no combustible items present. Hot work is common in almost all Vigor facilities. Hot work is any work that causes a spark or uses flames or heat. This includes welding, cutting, and grinding. The risk of fire is significant anytime hot work is conducted. As a result, we have detailed rules that must be followed at all times. A ship fire is very serious, so it is essential that you follow hot work rules at all times to minimize the risk to yourself and your coworkers. A permit must be obtained and posted in the specific area of any hot work and may differ slightly by location, but the critical elements are the same throughout the organization. The hot work permit will be written by trained personnel and will outline the necessary rules. These rules may include ventilation, fire watch, and cover-up requirements, which will depend on the specifics of the work area. This variability makes it essential that you check this permit each and every time and strictly follow the established guidelines. They are also updated frequently, so check the permit first and never assume that since you did hot work here before, it is safe now. Here are some basic rules about conducting hot work. Remove all flammable materials from within 35 feet of the area and all adjacent areas prior to beginning hot work. If the materials cannot be removed, they must be protected with appropriate fire cloth or similar material to minimize the risk of fire. Each operator is required to drop test their leads prior to starting hot work for the shift. In order to perform a drop test, open the valve to the proper pressure, then turn the valve to the off position. If the pressure drops, there is a leak in the line and it must be repaired prior to starting hot work. If it is not repaired, the area could fill with gas that make it impossible to breathe or could create an explosive atmosphere. It is critical that this test be performed every time you attach your torch or turn on any tanks. For these same reasons, never leave your torch on during breaks, at the end of a shift, or any time you are away for any reason. In addition, you must disconnect your torch and pull leads to an area that has fresh air. While conducting hot work, it is essential that you have sufficient ventilation in the space. This ventilation will prevent the accumulation of hazardous vapors and make certain that visibility in the area remains at a safe level. More often than not, a respirator is required when doing hot work. Always make certain that you post fire watches in accordance with the hot work permit. If you are on fire watch duty, you may not engage in any other task and must have proper fire suppression equipment on hand and be properly trained. Trained fire watch personnel can be identified by a sticker on their hard hat or a unique vest. In the event of a fire, always stop work and put the fire out immediately.
Definitely come with your game plan and like a clear idea of what it is you're here to do. Be in contact ahead of time, or if you're not in contact with the project management group, make sure that your boss is so you know exactly what it is you're coming into. Know who your points of contacts are. Try and know what vessel you're coming to. Sometimes just saying the name of the company doesn't always work. Knowing the vessel is really helpful, and then just come with all your equipment ready to go and a game plan.
Working at heights is common at Vigor. We have three primary means to access heights in our work: staging or scaffolding, aerial platform lifts, and scissor lifts. You must have the proper training to use any of these methods. Staging is constructed in our facility by competent staging builders. No person other than a competent staging builder is allowed to construct or modify staging. A tagging system is utilized on all staging in our facilities and should be strictly adhered to at all times. Prior to accessing any staging, you must check the tag. If it does not have a tag, it is not safe to use. If you will be working from the staging, please make certain that the staging has toe boards to prevent tools from falling on workers who may be working below. There are three colors of staging tags: green, yellow, and red. If an area is green tagged, it means that the staging is safe to use in its current configuration without fall protection. This includes proper accesses and sufficient safety railing to contain any workers who may need to use it. A yellow tagged area means that the staging is safe to use with restrictions. Those restrictions, such as fall protection requirements, will be spelled out on the tag itself. If you have questions about the staging, ask your supervisor. Finally, a red tagged area is an area that has been tagged as unsafe and should never be used. You should visually inspect the staging every time you access the staging. Any concerns you have about the safety of any staging should be directed to your supervisor, the project manager, or the facility safety representative. Aerial platforms, also called man baskets, are commonly used at Vigor. You should not use an aerial platform unless you have received the specific training required. You may be asked to provide evidence of training. A harness and lanyard system is to be utilized at all times when in an aerial platform. Make certain that you are using the proper tie-off point inside the lift for your lanyard, and never tie off to the rails of the basket. All Vigor locations are compliant with the Hazard Communication Standard and have procedures that govern our compliance. In its simplest form, this standard covers the basic provisions of our policy and provides guidance for any additional questions you may have. There are two primary components to the hazard communication policy at Vigor. First, all containers, except small point-of-use containers, must be labeled with the contents. Any relevant hazards posed by the material in the container must have appropriate warnings depending on the characteristics of the material. In the event you find an unlabeled container, please notify your supervisor or the safety or environmental department for disposition of the unlabeled container. Second, before working with any chemical, make certain that you have the safety data sheet for the chemical you are using, and make sure you understand what it is, what hazards it presents, the necessary steps to mitigate any hazard that may be presented, and what to do in the case of a spill. On occasion, a project will require the removal of lead-based paint. In these circumstances, a very thorough plan will need to be implemented. Each job is different, and an appropriate plan will be set up depending on the specifics of the job. It is imperative that you read and follow all posted information about a lead removal job. In the event you suspect lead, please notify your supervisor or a safety department representative so that a sample can be tested. Each Vigor facility has an in-place fire safety plan. Check with your supervisor about the safety plan for your facility. Because of the physical geography of each location, every Vigor facility has a unique set of evacuation procedures. Please become familiar with the evacuation plan and the alarm system in the facility where you are working. It may save your life and the lives of those around you. In addition to our commitment to safety, we are dedicated to environmental stewardship. We work in some of the most beautiful places on Earth, and we always work in a way that not only meets, but exceeds regulatory standards. In each facility, we have a person who is a key leader in our environmental management programs. Please determine who this individual is prior to starting work, so that you know who your go-to person is in the event you have questions. In our work, we often use materials that are labeled under the hazard communication requirement as hazardous, such as paint and solvent. These materials must be stored, handled, and disposed of properly to maintain a safe and clean work environment and to comply with regulatory standards. You are required to have a copy of the safety data sheet for each chemical you bring into the facility. Just as you must be aware of the physical hazards of your work in the shipyard, you should always be aware of the chemical hazards associated with your job and assignments. If you ever have questions or are uncertain about how to handle or dispose of a chemical, always ask a safety or environmental representative for assistance. Many types of waste are generated in the shipyard, and we have procedures for managing virtually every waste type, from empty spray paint cans to scrap wood. As a general rule, only common trash should be placed in garbage cans or dumpsters. All other waste materials, such as paint, empty rattle cans, wood, and scrap metal, have special procedures for their management and disposal. And remember, never dispose of any materials in storm drains or surface water.
The shipyard is a unique place within the environmental world. We're at that connection of land and water. A lot of just focus on facilities that exist on the water. Whilst there can be very complicated regulations about what can and can't be done here, it really boils down to some simple things, which is we don't put things in the water and we don't put things in the air. And whether that's dust, debris, grit, overspray, or it's oil or wastewater or untreated water or anything, it's just keep it simple. Don't put things in the water, don't put things in the air.
Paint and solvents are the most abundant chemicals used in the shipyard. These products contain volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. But VOCs can be hazardous to people's health and the environment. Because of this, the use of products with VOCs is closely regulated and monitored. If your job involves painting, you will be asked to report how much paint you use to environmental staff and take precautions while you work to minimize the release of VOCs into the air. Proper management of paint and other products with VOCs is an important part of our compliance program and effort to minimize our impact on the environment. Rainwater falling on the shipyard is collected in catch basins and conveyed by pipes for discharge into surface water. This rainwater can pick up pollutants on the ground and carry them to surface water, where they harm fish, degrade water quality, and contaminate sediments. You can do a lot to prevent rainwater pollution through good housekeeping, including cleaning up, reporting chemical spills to the environmental department, helping to prevent litter, and by never discarding anything into catch basins. A little effort goes a long way in preventing rainwater pollution. Please do your part to help keep our rivers and oceans clean. Ballast water management is a key issue at some of our facilities in order to prevent non-indigenous species from being introduced into any of our local waters and to comply with ballast water management regulations. In general, the ship's force is responsible for complying with ballast water requirements while in port. However, there are circumstances when Vigor personnel are tasked with removing ballast water from a ship. Should your job or assignment require you to assist with ballast water removal, it is important that there is close coordination with Vigor's environmental department to ensure the discharge meets all local requirements. If you have questions, please speak with your facility's environmental representative. Fuel transfers are an especially high-risk activity. To protect worker safety and to prevent environmentally harmful fuel spills, the U.S. Coast Guard requires that fuel transfers between ship and shore are only performed by qualified individuals designated by the company. All transfers, whether on the ship or to shore, require careful planning and coordination between craft supervision and the ship's force. Trash costs money and leaves a big environmental footprint. Because of this, Vigor has robust recycling programs at all of its locations. Everything from paint to scrap steel is recycled. Each shipyard recycles a little differently, so please make sure to learn about the recycling program at your location and help us reduce our waste.
Physical security here at the property is important. We sometimes will have military or public vessels in the yard, and they have site-specific security requirements. You may see our security ramp up, where we'll have tighter security and more strict access. And it is vital that the subcontractors assist us in maintaining that. From a safety, security, environmental standpoint, we're all in this together.
The security of the property of our customers, as well as that of our facilities and equipment, is very important to Vigor Industrial. In most of our facilities, access is restricted by physical barriers. Some access points are protected by security guards, and others may have a badge reader. Our larger locations, Seattle and Portland, are required to maintain a level of security as required by the Department of Homeland Security. The company works closely with the U.S. Coast Guard to ensure adequate measures are implemented and maintained. It is expected that you will support our efforts in complying with these requirements. There are 3 levels of maritime security: MARSEC 1, MARSEC 2, and MARSEC 3, with each successive number indicating a stricter level of scrutiny. In simple terms, MARSEC 1 governs normal business activities with regular posted security measures. MARSEC 2 requires entry and exit through the main gate, with additional guards posted at other entry and exit points and all vehicles subject to inspection. MARSEC 3 means local police or the U.S. Coast Guard will be called on to deal with security threats by locking down or evacuating the facility. For employees, customers, and tenants, an added measure of security is maintained through Vigor's badging system. A Vigor-issued badge will allow an individual to have access to a designated facility without the need to go through the posted guard shack. Access levels and authorized areas shall be designated by the facility security officer in each location. Badges are required to be returned to security at the completion of a project, or if employment with the company is ended. In some locations, individuals may be granted drive-in privileges, which allow them to drive a vehicle onto Vigor property. This privilege requires proof of current insurance as well as a signed agreement to observe all posted speeds and traffic signs. If parking inside the facility is permitted, your shipyard representative will designate your parking area prior to entry. It is important that you adhere to these parking instructions as well as posted speed limits. Lack of compliance will result in the loss of drive-in privileges, or potentially having your vehicle towed at your expense. All vehicles are subject to inspection upon entry or exit at all Vigor facilities. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. As a reminder, this is a broad introduction into the expectations we have for the work in our facilities. You will have a more detailed pamphlet that should be reviewed prior to starting work. We think that taking the time to get aligned before we start will ensure a smooth, efficient, safe, and environmentally sensitive relationship. Thanks again.